And,
Really
and
hoping.
can I say something before we begin? I just learned that you can do this. So up in Deborah's little right-hand corner, there are 3 dots. And if you click on that, you can see where it says pin video.
Yeah.
And that makes Deborah the main speaker. So if anybody's interested in doing that, it's kind of nice to be able to do that.
Or you can also do speaker view.
I think it's different depending on what your device is.
Okay.
Too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Susan. That's really helpful. Okay. So I'm going to mute everybody. And then, so Deborah, would you unmute yourself?
Yes, I already did. Thank you.
You might have to do it now again.
Yes, thank you. Well, I'm really glad to see so many friends here. It's always a little nerve-wracking to talk, so it's nice that I have friends. And actually, it's nice that, you know, with the Sangha, we have so many friends, and that's meant a lot to me over the last couple of months with the pandemic, that we have this connection, and I'm sure it means a lot to all of you. I had originally planned to do this talk, and it was going to be in person, and I planned to do all these, well, not a lot, but some actual experiments where I would have you do exercises and experience certain things, and they're kind of impossible to do with Zoom. So I may demonstrate a few of them, but I had to kind of change the talk a little bit. But I'd like to start in kind of the Zen tradition with a koan. So this is a koan that comes from the Gateless Gate. I think it's number 32. And it's about the 6th patriarch, Huineng, who a lot of you know who he is, very important Chinese teacher. And this is actually about after, you know, he was, when he received enlightenment, or I shouldn't say received enlightenment, when he received transmission, his teacher told him to run away and hide in the mountains because so many people were going to be jealous of him. So this is after he'd hidden in the mountains for 15 years or something. And he comes back and he's the teacher at a monastery. And the tradition was that when a teacher was going to give a talk, they would raise a flag. And so that the people surrounding and all the monks would know that there was going to be a talk that day. So on this particular day, there's a flag and it's out there flapping in the breeze. And 2 monks are sitting there, and one says, the flag is moving. And the other one says, the wind is moving. And they argue back and forth. No, the flag is moving. No, the wind is moving. No, the flag is moving. Well, Huineng hears them. And some people say he was tired of hearing them argue, you know, but that's not actually, at least in the book I read, it's not in the book. But anyway, Huineng comes by, the master, and he says, it's not the wind that moves. It's not the flag that moves. It's your mind that moves. So I thought this was very appropriate for talking about perception. And I would like to talk about visual perception. For the last 30 years, or, well, up until 2 years ago, I taught art. And as part of that, I taught visual theory. And I taught, for about 15 years, I taught a color theory class, which meant that I really had to know the physics, physiology, and the neurophysiology of how we see. So one of the things was really interesting to me when I was teaching this, that the more that I learned, the more it seemed impossible that the world we think we see, that we see. You know, there just is not enough information. And so, you know, for me, that really coincides with a lot of the information that we have from the Abhidharma and from sutras about how the mind works and about the reality of the world, you know, about the sense of illusion that we talk about in Buddhism. So I want to read just a little bit more. There's a talk that was given, it's called a Taisho, that was given by Yamada Roshi. And this is a Taisho talk on that particular koan. And I just want to read a little more of what he says. He says, the problem is that the koan seems to be whether the wind is blowing or the flag is blowing. But we must understand that the moving wind and the moving flag are not the reality or the fact. They are merely labels. If you say the wind is moving, The wind is all there is, and quite alone in the universe. There is no flag or mind outside the wind. If you say the flag is moving, it is the only thing in the universe. There is no wind or mind outside the flag. If you say the mind is moving, the mind is all. Nothing exists outside of it. The true fact transcends all of these three. And what is that? You must search for it deeply by yourself. Of course, he won't tell us, what is that, of course. But, the koan seems to suggest, oh, it's the mind. And then, this teacher says, it's not that either. There's something else, there's something beyond that. So I wanted to talk just a moment about the 5 skandhas, and if you're Theravadan, you may call it the 5 khandhas. And these are often referred to as the 5 heaps or aggregations. Actually, in Zen, sometimes they call it the 5 conditions. And these are kind of the stages or ingredients of how our mind works, how our mind perceives information and forms consciousness. And some people say these are the parts of the self that make up the self, that give us the idea that we are a self. So those 5 are form, which includes all matter, all beings, and it even includes our sense organs and the first contact of our sense organs. So sound, when we first interact with sound or taste or touch. Second one is sensation, sometimes called feeling. I don't like the term feeling because we start thinking of emotions, and it's not really about emotions. Perception, mental formations, and then consciousness. And so these are very, kind of developing reactions to interaction with form. I wanted to just do, I'm going to do a couple things that are active. And one of the things I wanted to do is I just want to hit a bell. And, I don't know how well it's going to come through, but this is one of my favorite things to do when I'm sitting sometimes, is that if there's a bell or a dog barks, is to actually really pay attention to what happens when the sound occurs. And so what I'd like you to do is I'm going to hit the bell as loud as I can. I hope it's not too loud. I just don't know if it's going to come through. And I want you to try to catch it the first moment it occurs. Just pay attention to it, and then watch it kind of, don't just pay attention in your mind, but in your body, and how it kind of echoes through to become a conscious thing where you're kind of saying, oh, that was a bell. And I just want you to see if, I don't know if it's going to work, so we'll see. Okay, ready? You guys are going to anticipate this, so it's that's going to be a factor too. Did it come through well? The bell? Yes? Okay. So the Heart Sutra, which many of you know the Heart Sutra. Heart Sutra is the heart of the perfection of wisdom, sometimes called the perfection of transcendent wisdom. And this was actually a reaction against, there was a whole movement in Buddhism in which they thought that these ideas of form, sensation, perception, etc. were real and existent, which they are in a sense. But the Heart Sutra is actually was a reaction to that, saying, no, there's something beyond that. And basically what it's saying is that there is a transcendent wisdom that you can perceive beyond those things. And that's really what it's about. So the Heart Sutra, I'm just going to read the first part of it. Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, when practicing deeply the Prajnaparamita, perceived that all 5 skandhas are empty and was saved from all suffering and distress. O Shariputra, form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. That which is form is emptiness. That which is emptiness is form. So this was a primary teaching of the Mahayana. And it was a reaction to some of the later occurrences in actually Sarvastivadin, mostly, a reaction against Sarvastivadin, but the Abhidharma. So what does it mean when they say empty? Well, that's a question. There's a lot of argument over what emptiness means. And basically, we don't have a very good word for it. But what it means is that things, forms, and sensations, perceptions, all these things, that they have no essential intrinsic nature. You know, that there's nothing that is, it's like we say we don't have a self. It's the same thing. It's that things don't have a intrinsic nature either, that they are also subject to dependent origination. And I'm hoping I can explain. I know these are a lot of terms, but I'm hoping I can explain this a little bit more. So what I want to do is I want to talk about visual processing, because as I say, when I had studied Buddhism for a while before I started teaching this stuff. And what was amazing to me was how well they coincided. And so to me, much of visual processing reflects these steps of the 5 skandhas. So the reason why I think visual processing is so important is that they found that about 80% of the activity of our brain is stimulated by visual. It's not stimulated by sound or smell or taste or touch. It's actually visual. And, our world is solid in a visual way. I have dogs, and, they smell everything. And I sometimes am trying to imagine what it must be like for them that the world is solid in smell. Whereas for us, it's solid visual. I mean, it's a totally different world. It must be a totally different world for them. But for us, what makes the world solid is what we see. And we say things like a picture is worth 1,000 words. I'll believe it when I see it. We say things like that, So the thing about vision is that we have actually no physical contact with the things we see. And I'm sure you guys know all this stuff. A lot of this is real basic stuff, but the way that we see something is the electromagnetic waves come down and they're flying all over the place, but they reflect off of objects, and objects have the ability to reflect different wavelengths of light. And so some of them, like a shiny surface, reflects a lot of light, and a dull surface reflects very little, and a red object reflects wavelengths that make us see red, and those sorts of things. So but it's really these electromagnetic waves. And the thing about it is that what we see of electromagnetic waves, someone actually said to me that if you had a football field and that represented how many types of electromagnetic waves there were, that what we see is like this much of it, just a tiny little bit of it. And so, there are electromagnetic waves that are X-rays, gamma waves, cosmic waves, radio waves, there's all these other, and they're just flying all over the place. But we have this organ, that's very specific to a certain range of electromagnetic waves. And even out of light, even the part of electromagnetic waves that are light, we only see a very particular range. And if you were a hummingbird, you'd see a different range. And if you're a dog, you'd see a different range, So the beings in the world is different for all these different beings. It's different for everyone. Okay, so that's the first thing, is we have no physical contact. So already we're talking about a dependent origination, that we're dependent on this environment, this stuff, these different things in the environment to start to see. So electromagnetic waves come into our eye, and actually only about a third of the light that enters our eye is absorbed anyway, and we don't even see it. And then we have at the back of our eyes, and I'm sure you guys know all this, we have almost like a slide screen, but it's photosensitive cells that react to light. They're stimulated by light. You know, they're not stimulated by any of those other waves floating around, but just light. Okay, so the thing about it is not only have we already reduced the amount of what, you know, what's coming into our eyes, we've already reduced it by a third, but when you, when it hits those cells in the retina, and I hope this isn't too technical. I mean, I know it probably is, and then I'm going to bring it back to Buddhism. So bear with me if this is, if you're going, oh gosh, how come there's so much science? Just bear with me for a minute. You know, when it hits those cells, you know, there's thousands of cells in a millimeter, or you know, of your retina, and so you may have 1,000 cells all reacting to the light that hits it, you know, this detailed information that's coming into you, and they may all report to one cell, okay? And that one cell's job is to average all that information into one signal, okay? So what's happening is that this detail that we think that's come into us has been averaged down. I mean, what our vision is about is what's the average of out there. And so we reduce it down. We reduce it down to very little information. And that's sent through to the brain. It's actually reduced down a few more times. The other thing that happens at that particular point is that, let's say these cells are reporting to this cell. Well, there might be another cell next door that cells are reporting to, and their job is to compare. And why that's important is because we're most sensitive to things being different. So our vision and our brain is set up to see things as separate, to see the differences, that we're more sensitive to an edge than we are if things are alike, you know? So, and that's very important. It's very important for our functioning in a couple of ways. But so let me go on to one more thing, and then I'll try to bring it back. The next thing, you know, that I think that's really important to know is that when this is finally arrives in our brain, it's set to the visual cortex in the back of our brain. And that particular part of our brain job is to sort that information. So it takes this information that's come to it and it says, okay, this is color information. I'm going to send it to this part of the brain. This is information about a face, and we have specific areas for faces. I'm going to send it to this part of the brain. There's parts of the brain that are only for motion, and so some of the information is sent to motion. There are actually cells there's a whole area in the brain that's for what we call orientation. There are cells that only respond if there's an edge that's at an angle like this. And then there's another cell that if it's like this, and there's other cells that if it's like this, you know. So this information is sorted and it's sent out into the brain. And what what's amazing to me, and this is a great mystery to, as far as I know, to neurophysiologists, is that they can never figure out that the information ever is put back together. Okay, so it's sent out to different parts of the brain, but there's no communication back together. Okay? So we have a visual apparatus that's about defining differences. It's about separating, averaging, and defining differences. So what I had wanted to do with you guys, and I am kind of unable to do, is have you do some of these little exercises that show you that you really don't see what you think you see, that the world that we think we see is made up of conditioned information, I guess we would say, which is what Buddhism tells us, right? It tells us that our view of the world is conditioned. So I'm going to try to just demonstrate a couple of these things, and then I'm going to ask afterwards. I wrote up something. If you want to try them at home, I'll have Claudia send it out, and you can try these things if you want. But I'm just going to kind of show them to you in the first place. Some of these you've already done. Anybody ever done this? Anybody recognize this? Blind spot?
No.
Okay. Well, this is something where, and I won't do the whole thing, but you cover one eye, you stare at this little cross, and you move this, you have to only hold a little way away from your eye, and you move it until this circle disappears, okay? And what it will disappear, it'll disappear about here in your vision, something like this. The reason it disappears is there is a part of our vision where we can't see anything. So if you move that circle to that spot, it disappears, okay? So that means that always when you're walking around, there's a black hole in your vision right here. And I would ask you a show of hands how many ever see that black hole, but I know you don't see it, right? Okay. So the second part of this is you do exactly the same thing. You stare at this cross. Can you guys actually see this cross? And you move this part until it disappears. And what will happen is it fills in with a line, okay? So what that shows you is the fact that the brain, when it can't see something, fills up in what it thinks is there, right? Brain fills it in. We don't see. We really have a big hole in our vision, and we don't see it. Okay, I'm going to get closer here. You guys probably aren't not going to be able to see this, but this is something you can do easily at home. Well, I don't think you're going to be able to see this because I can't get close enough. But if you need two people for this, you need somebody to do something. I'm going to follow a line with my eyes, and then you need somebody to look at what your eyes do. Okay, so somebody needs to watch your eyes, how they act. So I'll try it, but I don't think you guys are going to be able to see. I'd have to get really close here. I'm going to lift it up and see if I can make it really close. But you probably can't see my eyes. The lighting's really bad. You can't see my eyeballs, can you?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Okay. All right, kind of. I had to turn the light up really high because I can't see my own notes. You know, I'm getting to that age. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to sit in front of a mirror and you want to look at first your right eye, and then you want to look at your left eye. Okay. Oh, I told you I was going to do the other thing. Oh, let me do the other thing first. Okay, let me do the other thing first. Sorry. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to follow a straight line, and what I'm going to follow is the line between the wall and the ceiling. And I want you to watch how my eyes act. And I'm just going to go slowly along the line. And can you see my eyes move?
Yes. Yeah, we can see.
Are they moving smoothly?
They're jerking.
They're jerking. Okay, that's what I want you to see. That's all I want you to see. Okay, that's it. Okay, so why is that? These are something called saccades. And saccades are basically just the eye scanning. The eye scans. What's important about it is the eye moves to a point and sees, and then it moves to another point and it sees, and it moves to another point and it sees, right? So it's moving along the line, picking points, seeing those points. In between seeing those points, it turns off. Your vision turns off while it's moving, okay? Turns off. So, you know, what your brain has done is it's just like in geometry, you know, if you have a bunch of points, you can figure there's a line in between it, right? Did you ever do that in geometry? I don't know. Anyway, okay. So your brain just figures, oh, there's all these points. They're pretty much in line. It must be a line. It fills it in. Okay. We don't actually, half the time your vision's turned off. Okay. So the other thing I was going to, and you don't need to see this, I was going to suggest that you do. And this is to prove that your vision turns off while it's moving, okay? That you can actually see that your vision turns off, is you need to look in a mirror and you look at your left eye first, and then you look at your right eye, and you can just keep doing this, left eye, right eye, and you try to see your eyes moving. You can feel your eyes moving, but you cannot see your eyes moving. You cannot catch your eyes moving. You know, and the reason you can't catch your eyes moving is your vision's turned off, okay? Your vision turns off. So not only are we walking around with a hole in our vision, but our eyes are moving all the time and the vision's turning off. It's turning off. But our brain is filling it in. It's filling in what we think would be there. Okay, let me show you one other thing. Okay, so I've just got 3 pens of different colors. You could use pens. You could use pieces of paper. You could use anything that's different colors. The closer to value they are, the better. Not too pastel or something like that. Okay, what you want to do is put them behind, oh, my cap's coming off here. Put them behind your back or something and mix them up so you don't know what order they're in. And then you simply want to stare forward and you want to bring these pens up and you want to see where you can see color, okay? Where you could tell, okay, I can see that there's some color. I can't even see what kinds of colors they are. Now I kind of think, oh, I think that I can see an orange, but I'm not sure which one it is. And I really can't start to see color. I start to see it about here, but I probably can't tell which is blue and green until I get it right up here, okay? All right, so I don't know about you, but the world looks like it's full color to me. You know, I think I see color out here. I think I see color all the way around, but you can't see color out here. And we know that. I don't know how many of you guys know about macular degeneration or heard of macular degeneration, right? Yeah, some of you may have it. Okay. So there's an area of your retina, it's called the macula lutea. It just means yellow spot actually, but it's this kind of central vision. And it's the only place that we see color. Okay, so if you hold your hand out with your thumbnail out in front of you, the area of your thumbnail is the only area where you can see color and where you have detailed vision. You don't have it out here. I mean, if I ask you to thread a needle, you're not going to go out here and try to thread it. You know, you're going to find there's a sweet spot right here someplace where you can thread the needle, right? And that's because that area is the only area that we see detail. It's the only area that we see color. And yet, our world is full of color. Full of color. You know, I have a hard time believing this. You know, I've taught this for years and I still think, no, I see color out here. I see color out here. You know, that's my experience. Okay, so why is that? There's a couple of reasons. One is your eyes are always scanning. So we already looked at those scanning, the saccades. Your eyes are always scanning. You don't walk around just staring at a spot in front of you very much. So your eye's picking up a lot of information. But I wanted to try something else, and that is I want you to think about what peanut butter tastes like. Can you remember what peanut butter tastes like? Yeah? Okay. I want you to remember what it feels like to have a piece of aluminum foil in your mouth. Do you remember that if you bite down on it? Yeah. Oh, God, you can't help it. You make a face, right? What about walking through fresh grass? You know, fresh green grass. You know, I can feel that. What about how does dirt taste? Do you remember how dirt? And I think the last time I ate dirt I was probably pretty young, but I can remember how it tastes. And I can remember how does it feel to bite into a popsicle stick after you've eaten a popsicle? Do you remember, you know what that's like? Okay. So one of the things that happens is that so much of our vision is memory. You know, so when you see a little kid that's like 2 or 3 years old, we used to have a kid, he was a little older than that. He used to live next door to us when my son was young. And so anything in the house got broken, we say, Ian did it. And the reason why we did that is because this kid would come over, my son would get a new toy, bend it, hit it, chew on it, you know. And, you know, 2 and 3 year olds, that's the first thing they do. They put it in their mouth, they, you know, hit it, they, you know, all this kind of stuff. Well, I mean, it's really bad to tell kids not to do that. They need to do that because they're building information that builds their world. And the visual world that we have, I don't know, do you know that, you know how sometimes there's furniture that looks like it's wood, but it's actually just printed paper that's glued on? Do you know what I mean? It's not even a laminate, it's glued wood printed paper on it. Do you know what I'm talking about? And it's pretty convincing. So what happens in our vision is that if you see something that's about the right color to be wood and has some of the markings that look like wood and is on an object that could very well be wood, your brain's going to see wood, even though you get very little information, actual information about that. You know, the visual information that's coming in is not enough to tell you that. But what you do is you bring all that memory, all those experiences, all that stuff, and turns into this complete wood. And if you've had a terrible experience with wood when you're a kid, it probably brings emotional stuff. I don't know anybody who's had a terrible experience with wood, but you know, we bring all this stuff. So when Buddhism tells us that all things are conditioned, you know, that we are deluded, that the whole world is an illusion, you know, it's not just, you know, I used to think, okay, we're deluded. Oh, I guess like socially, I don't kind of understand, always see things, it's colored by my social experience. But I never thought of it like physically, that my whole world, my whole perception of the world is conditioned, is deluded. And I wanted to read a couple things by the Dalai Lama. He says, existence can only be understood in terms of dependent origination. Well, you know I'm talking about something very specific and concrete when we talk about vision, or maybe it's not concrete, but anyway, something very specific. But what we just talked about with vision is dependent origination. You know, that our vision, what we think we see, is dependent on everything else we've ever experienced. And, you know, it's like, where does our vision start? Does it start in our eye? Does it start in our mind? Does it start with electromagnetic waves? Does it start with the outside? And what is the outside? And where do I stop? And where does the outside start? You know, I mean, we can't perceive without, there isn't an edge, you know, we just can't perceive it that way. Okay, so the other thing that the Dalai Lama said that I thought was really important is he says, the existence of things and events is not in dispute. It is in the manner in which they exist that must be clarified. So I think one of the amazing things to me is these monks, a couple thousand years ago, just by paying attention, noticed all this stuff that we're just beginning to understand in science, you know? And over again, science coincides with what Buddhists found out. And I think, you know, we can, just like I tried to do with the bell, and I keep trying to do this. I love when dogs bark when I'm sitting, because they usually will bark again. So like if I keep paying, I'll keep trying to catch it and see what's happening, you know, to see if I can catch something pure, that pure first interaction, you know? And so they used to bug me. Now, you know, they were disturbing my meditation. Now it's like something I can use. Okay, so let me, I want to read one other part of that koan, and it's simply that in the talk that Yamada Roshi gave, he talks about another story, and I'm just going to finish with that, I think. So it's talking about a Master Sono, and one day one of his disciples comes to visit him, and he's a very well-known, very venerated teacher, and this disciple brings him melons, and they decide to open one of the melons and share it. And while they're enjoying the melon, Master Sono says, "It's very sweet." And his disciple says, "Yes, it is very sweet." Then the master asks, "What do you think? Is the melon sweet or is the tongue sweet?" If the melon is sweet, the sweetness has nothing to do with the tongue. If the tongue is sweet, the sweetness has nothing to do with the melon. Where does the sweetness come from? Try to tell me that. So the disciple, being a good disciple, does try to tell him. And he says, it comes from the causal contact of the tongue and the melon. And Master Sono kind of explodes and says, that's merely from the theoretical standpoint of Buddhism. It contains no experience of the Zen monk, of you, no experience. The monk then asked, if so, where does it come from? Please give me a turning word. Master Sono gave the following instruction. Where does it come from? Even the Buddhas and patriarchs cannot tell you. If you search for where, you will find the whole universe in the melon, and that there is no tongue outside the melon. Or you will find that the whole universe is in the tongue, and that there is no melon outside the tongue. In the world of reality, there is no subject nor object. The real fact transcends both mind and things. We call it essential activity of no thinking, which has been transmitted from Buddha to Buddha, from patriarch to patriarch. So I hope, I have to tell you that I was really excited about trying to bring these two ideas together. And about 2 days ago, I went, oh, I'm in over my head. I can't do this, so I hope that I got something across and I hope that you enjoyed it. And if anyone has any questions, I guess you can unmute them. And I didn't use any of the slides.
What I'm going to do is everybody will stay muted, but if you wish to speak, to ask a question, unmute yourself. And then afterwards you can mute yourself back, because we get interference if a lot of people are unmuted. Anybody have a comment or a question?
Well, thank you so much. That was wonderful. I think that you tied it all together really, really clearly. It seemed to me that in the beginning, that first koan about the flag and the wind related to no form, emptiness is only form, form is only emptiness. That those were kind of illustrations of each other. And then the ending, the last story, again, kind of reinforced that. And so you had given us the Buddhist teachings on either end, and then the physical reasons that you understood in your studies too. I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I think, what's interesting, I think that it's one thing like to the things that I talked about visual information, that's kind of intellectual understanding of it. And one of the things I really wish I could have done is given you that experience of not seeing things you think you see. Because, in Buddhism, and, these stories are about actually experiencing these things. And I think a lot of times we experience them and don't pay attention unless we have a teacher or someone who helps us see that. But I think there are things that are accessible to everyone,
Yeah, well, and I think those stories did help us to see viscerally. Yeah.
This, if I can jump in real quick, do you guys remember the film Alien?
Mm-hmm.
The very first one, because what you're saying, Deborah, really brought home to me with that film is that I saw it and I remember thinking, gosh, they didn't show the monster very much. And then I saw it again and I realized they showed it quite a lot.
Mm.
But the first time I was so scared and I was so, horrified by it that I think my mind just sort of closed off because I didn't want to see it. It was too frightening.
Mm. And, it's interesting. I know in plays, like I remember somebody explaining to me about Medea, the play Medea, when they don't show her killing her children. And the reason they don't show it is because it's much more horrible when it happens in our imagination.
Yeah. John, you wanted to say something?
Yes, you apologized in the beginning for maybe spending too much time on the science and not enough time on Buddhism, but I really enjoyed all of the scientific ins and outs that you presented, and I thought they were very appropriate. And also I was thinking, okay, we're not really seeing what we think we're seeing. When you rang the bell, I was thinking, yeah, we're not really hearing what we think we're hearing either, and especially when it comes through Zoom, we're
Oh,
miles away from that bell.
Yeah.
And when you think about all the details that go into getting that sound from where you're experiencing it to where we are,
yeah, yeah.
there's a whole lot more science there too.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
this happens, consensus reality, in other words. Unless we have a consensus reality, we couldn't live, because you'd have to reassemble all these little dots all the time. So we kind of agree on the things we see. But you remember the book Walkabout,
Yeah.
where the young girl walks across the desert with the Maori?
Mhm.
Now he sees things and hears things and knows things that
An Aboriginal, not a Maori.
the Aboriginal she has no idea, because she has no reference, no conditioning, and he is totally aware of everything that's moving, everything that may happen. And it's an extremely beautiful thing, because she's supposed to be the civilized one. And it brings home that we only respond to what touches us, literally. And so is one other point. If the bird flies and sees, the hawk flies and sees the mouse so far down, and we have all that primitive brain in us, can we get to that point that we can see as animals see, just using the vision, of course, hearing also, but
You know, one of the things I used to tell my students when I would talk about all the different kinds of light waves and different electromagnetic waves and things like that, and really the way our eye responds to specific range of light is by chemicals that are sensitive, and they're just chemicals that combine and separate. And I used to joke, and I'm still waiting for a student to do this, that somebody just needs to write a science fiction novel about taking a pill to be able to see x-rays, or to be able to see some other, you know, because we're just that hair's breadth away in our chemistry and our, you know, from being a different being, but we're so specific.
I was thinking, Deborah, about artists, and imagine there's a nice old oak tree out in a field, and you take 1,000 artists and stick them all over around with their, you know, their, what's that thing called? The
Easel.
Their easels. Well, you would not get the same, you know, the same artwork.
No, you would not get the same art. Well, and you know, when I was teaching drawing, the hardest thing to teach, you know, you get, because what you want, you know, we spend so much time when we're young putting together the world, like figuring out that the way shadows work in a corner mean that the corner is going away from us and things like that. And so when you teach somebody drawing, you teach them to kind of take that all apart again and just see the shadows and the light again. And there's some students can't think abstractly, like they can't get away from the object. You know, they see a can, they draw a can with lines, and they can't see the light. You know, they can't just separate out the light. It's the hardest thing to teach, you know, and in a way in Buddhism, that's what we're doing. We're taking it apart again, you know, and trying to see it with some immediacy. Anyone else?
You know, I'm trying to think if this is relevant in some way. I'm just not sure. I've been thinking about it all the time you were talking, is that, you know, in Tibetan Buddhism, people are taught to meditate with their eyes open.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really ever know why or what was, you know, the effect of that. But my teacher said that it helps us realize that our mind is not inside our skull, that our mind is all in our body, and that our mind is outside. And so I don't know if that's has any relevance at all, but I think it does in some way. I'm not sure.
I think it does, because part of you know what this brings up is, where is our edge? Is there an edge? You know, is there a separation? We can't find it, and we don't. None of this exists without the interaction. We just don't exist. Our brain doesn't function. Nothing happens. You know, and so I think it does relate.
One thought, Deborah, I also, like John, I appreciated your discussion about how we see
Mhm.
and how deceiving it can be, but we don't see it as deceiving. And I'm recalling Thich Nhat Hanh talking about perception and how unreliable our perception of things is, and that we have to notice when we're perceiving something, being aware of what we're telling ourselves may not be what is really occurring.
Mm.
Perception, which you started with.
Yeah, it makes you realize when they say that when there's witnesses to a crime, you know, they'll get 10 different people telling 10 different stories, seeing different colored cars, doing whatever.
Yeah.
It makes it perfectly plausible, you know, that we would all see it different, experience it different, pick out different points.
Yeah, they say eyewitness accounts are notoriously unreliable,
Mhm.
ironically. Okay, well,
I'd say it was nice seeing you all, but since we don't see you, really.
yeah.
Deborah, do you have any of your pieces? I saw one at the art museum. I guess was it last year when your piece was in there?
Yes.
Your painting.
Mhm.
Do you have anywhere out there that people could see them in?
You know, I don't. I was supposed to have a show in May, and I think for the foreseeable future, there are not going to be any art shows.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very sad. Because the piece you did for that show at the art museum was just beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, everyone. Unless anyone has to take a moment for any final comment, anybody? I wanted to thank you so much. I too loved all the science. It made it so convincing. And
I've given you so much more, but it would have taken a few hours.
Deborah, it was wonderful.
Should I send you? Can I send you? I don't know if people are interested. Are you interested in these exercises? Does anybody want to try them? So I'll send it to Claudia, and Claudia can send it out. Does that work? Or should
I would like it since we have time.
Yeah, you time. But I'll warn you, when you go stare at yourself in the mirror, maybe close the door because somebody's probably gonna think you're nuts. So,
That reminds me of a joke.
Yeah.
Too, Deborah, especially the black spot, if I can see where my blind spot is.
yeah. Just remember, when you hold that thing, don't hold it out here. You got to hold it like.
Okay.
Right here.
Okay.
Thanks, Deborah.
All right. Thank
Good,
you.
Deborah.
Good to see you all.
Thank you very much.
And thank you. I was going to skip tonight, or I couldn't get here in time, I thought, and I'm so glad I didn't miss it. It was great.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
Good. I'm glad it
Great.
felt like I was taking a chance, but.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank
Great,
you.
thank you.
good night, everybody.
Where did that come from? Seeing is believing.
Yeah.
Where did it come from? I don't know.
Hi, Deborah. Great talk. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Night.
Hey, good night.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Night all.
Night.
Bye.
Night.
Thank you, Deborah. I really liked your talk. So
Oh, thank you.
fascinating. Good night.
Good night.
I'm glad you did.
Night. Thank you.
Good night.